Hello, and welcome to the Ohio Bankers League kickoff session of Diversity Dialogues. Currently today, we are scheduled to have Jasmine Williams joining us, and Jasmine is in the process of getting all logged in. And I want to welcome all of you, and actually I'm going to start by turning it over to Michael Adamant, our president and CEO of the Ohio Bankers League, so that he can also share with you. I'm just going to see also where we're getting that feedback from, where we need to get somebody paused. But we want to have Mike go ahead and share with you the purpose of why we put this program together, what it is that we're hoping to achieve out of it, and then our appreciation to all of you for being with us today. So Mike, you should be, just trying to make sure that you get unmuted.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. Good morning and welcome to everyone on the line here today. As you know, today we are starting a dialogue. The best leaders know when it's time to sit back and listen so they can drink in the experiences and insights of others in order to better serve in their roles. Learning is key for all of us. Thanks to each of you for making the OBL's first diversity dialogue a priority. I thank Stephanie Watson, the OBL's Vice President of Professional Development, for her leadership in coming up with this new and innovative idea. We're really excited to get this kicked off. I extend a special thanks to Jasmine Williams for her willingness to be the first to join us in this endeavor and to share her story and to kick off an important conversation regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion with bankers across the Buckeye State. Jasmine, it's just such a pleasure to have gotten to know over the last several years. We really appreciate all she does for the industry. Stephanie, I will hand it back off to you.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Mike. Mike, as he mentioned, talked about these programs and the dialogue we want to have, and I want to share with everyone what it is that we are hoping to accomplish through this program. When we started this program, it started because in all my years of HR and 15 years that I've been listening to HR, I hear people talk about the problems we're having with diversity and why we need to do something to improve diversity overall. And there's a myth sometimes of the things that we're doing right and of the successes that we've had so far. And what I'm hoping to accomplish through these is to begin by spotlighting the diverse talent that we do have in the bank industry. While there can always be room for improvement, there's some outstanding individuals across the state that you're going to get a chance to hear from that you may not have even realized were out there. And then from understanding the successes that their bank had and getting and nurturing those individuals, you can start to build a better strategy. So for leaders who are looking for how do we do it, hearing from people who've done it effectively is a great way to start. It'll also give bankers an opportunity to gain insights. What often happens when we want to build a DE&I strategy is leaders will start to talk to each other, and you get a senior leadership team that all looks exactly the same, trying to solve a question of diversity, equity, and inclusion without necessarily having the resource or access to somebody who could provide some insight in that area. We're hoping through these dialogues, leaders, regardless of how much or little diversity you have within your markets, will get a broad group to be able to listen to and understand and gain insights from. When talking about DE&I throughout these dialogues, we're going to be talking about it from its most simplest form. We're going to be thinking of diversity as variety. And so if we imagine it as a dinner party, diversity is that idea of inviting all types of people to the table, multiple people to come over and share that meal. Equity is that concept of fairness. So everybody that's going to come to that dinner party is going to get an appetizer, an entree, and a dessert. Everybody's getting that same thing. And then inclusion is where a lot of people don't understand that makes or breaks the whole piece around diversity, because inclusion is that involvement and valuing of those individuals. And it is not only having invited them to the table, but it's having invited them to bring a dish and understanding and trying out that dish and recognizing the value that that dish can bring to the overall experience of the meal. That is how we'll be thinking about DE&I as we go through these dialogues. In a diversity sense, we'll also be thinking about diversity in all of its dimensions. There's multiple levels to diversity, and so we are going to be looking at each of those levels, and we are going to be talking about how we create inclusion based upon all of those levels, so that those of you who may not have a big ethnically diverse environment can still find ways to enhance your diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. The three areas and dimensions of diversity that we'll be talking about is nature, nurture, and knowledge. The nature side are those components that we didn't get to control, that we were just born with. So that would be color or race, the idea of age, and the idea of gender. The nurture part are also typically going to be components that we didn't get to choose. They're the components that impacted how we were as we were growing up, and that made a lot of us into who we are today. Those would be concepts such as the geographic location that you were born in, your socioeconomic status, and then the parental status that you had. What did you come from? A family dynamic, big family, small family, divorced family, married family? All of those dynamics are part of that nurture piece. On the knowledge piece, these are the dimensions of diversity that are based upon choices that we made. For example, career, which career path we chose, how I think is very different than somebody who went into the accounting field. Do you do military service? People who have gone into military and come back, especially as veterans, find they have a tough time sometimes within the workforce, and we do need to be mindful of the impact that they have. And then finally, parental status and how choosing to have a child or not have a child, or finding yourself being able to or not have a child, and how that impacts what you're able to do and the decisions that you make. All of these elements, nature, nurture, and knowledge, are all elements of diversity that can impact the innovation that comes to a table. And at the end of the day, that's the business case for diversity. The business case for diversity is innovative thought drives profits. And innovative thought is enhanced when you have diverse thought at the table. But it doesn't just have to be that nature concept of diversity. There are other elements of diversity that we'll talk about over the course of these 10 weeks that I think you'll find can also have a significant impact. How can you as listeners participate? The first thing is, what might you want to participate in and what might you want to do? And we are supportive of any of you asking questions. So if there's questions that you want to ask, you can put those into the question field, and we will answer those. There's a question there right now that I will get to as soon as I can. So I apologize if somebody's had a question, I haven't responded to it yet. We also, excuse me, I just lost my slide there. We also are interested in your insights. So as our banker shares their story and I share my story, some of you may have a story as well. And we welcome you typing those in, and we will talk about those and share your stories. We won't share your name unless you specifically ask us to, but we will share those insights so that everyone is able to hear and see something that might be different than something you may hear us talk about. We also are interested in feedback. If we've shared something and you have a thought around it, you agree, you disagree, you think of it a little bit differently, we welcome that feedback from you. Anything that you'd recommend that we do to make these programs better, anything that we could do to enhance them, we want to definitely hear that. And then the last thing are suggestions. Maybe you have a topic that you would really like to have us tackle over the course of the next 10 weeks in these diversity dialogues. Or maybe you have a suggestion for a panelist, a banker that you think we should be highlighting, we should be spotlighting over the course of this series. I absolutely welcome all of those. So that's what you can do to participate. How you can participate are 3 different ways. During the live session itself, you can participate via the question field. You type those in, and Paige Houlihan, Bank Services Specialist here from the Ohio Bankers League, is on the call with me to help kind of monitor and look through and watch and let us know if there's one that's pending out there that we haven't missed or addressed. And so thank you, Paige, for your support in that effort. You can email me. You can email me at swatson@ohiobankersleague.com. You can do that during the live session. You can also do it after, or you can also feel free to give me a call. My phone number is on there, and I am happy to connect regarding any of the concepts that I've listed over on the left-hand side under what. I want to take a quick poll of our listeners, and I just want to understand kind of who all we have at the table and their involvement in the call. So I'm launching a poll. My questions are 2. Are you a diverse individual and you want to just hear the insights of other diverse individuals from across the organization? Are you a non-diverse leader who is looking to gain insights? So if you go ahead and click on that, it'll give us some kind of information to understand who's on the call. All of your answers are confidential. I'm not able to see who participated in the poll or what answer you gave. And we'll just give a few more seconds to see. We've got 81% of you have voted. I appreciate that. It's fabulous for the first time we're kicking off this poll. And so I'm going to go ahead and close it. And I will share the results to just kind of give people an idea of who's on the call. And so excited to see that 63% are non-diverse leaders who are here to gain insights. That really is showing and demonstrating your commitment to diversity, and I thank you so much for doing that. And then for those of you who joined who are diverse, in whatever way or capacity you're diverse, thank you for being on, and we look forward to you sharing your insights because it will be beneficial to these bankers as well. Today's topic. We are going to talk about what indicates a commitment to DE&I. So many of you have felt the need to say we're committed to DE&I, whether that's current based upon events that have occurred or whether that's something that is because of your constant passion around it. But what indicates that? What conveys that you have a real commitment? What conveys that you don't, despite what you say? And providing some thoughts around that for our leaders. And then how you can reflect that DE&I commitment on website and in social media. Oftentimes, you'll have a company who will say, we have a strong commitment to diversity, but then if a customer or a potential employee goes out to their website or their social media, they might have to go through 5 to 10 pages before they can find one diverse person. That probably doesn't send the message that ties to the commitment that the bank is trying to convey. And so what are some ways that you can do that without just having it feel like you have that token, you know, where's Waldo? How do I find that one person that they've put on the site to have diversity represented? So the key takeaways will be ways that you can authentically commit to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then ways that you can truly demonstrate diversity on your website and in your social media. So one last piece, and then we will get started. I just want to hear from you guys today, which topic of the two that I just shared with you are you the most interested in hearing about? Which one do you go, this is the one, I could only listen to you talk about one, this would be the one that I'm most interested in. Got 30% of you voted so far. Thanks for being so quick on getting into these polls. That's fabulous. We are at 67%, so we'll just give it maybe 5 more seconds and get into that 80% range, and then I will close it. And thank you very much. I'll go ahead and close it out now. And 85% of you are really looking into how you authentically commit to diversity and inclusion. So that's where we'll make sure we share. We spend quite a bit of our time, and then we'll just touch on a couple of the pieces around the website and social media for the 15% of you who are looking for that. Today's guest panelist is Jasmine Williams. Jasmine is the operational and electronic specialist at the Northside Bank and Trust Company. She has her MBA. She is a part of our Bank Leadership Institute and is finishing up that program as we complete this last piece of the graduation ceremony that we have pending. And what really impressed me about Jasmine, and the reason I wanted to bring her in, one, she was very open and honest about how hard it can be when there's only 1 or 2 or just a handful of diverse individuals, and a company makes a commitment to diversity and a lot of weight gets put on the shoulders of a single person or a single couple of people. And I think it's a great perspective that we need to be mindful of and share with leaders. It's wonderful to have an individual at the table, but to just understand it does feel like the weight of the world sometimes when you are making decisions for every diverse person of every type of diversity in the entire company or in the entire state that you are pulling from. And I think that's a great story for us to hear and share and talk about how we can support employees who are in that position. And then also, Jasmine came from a bank that was it's an entirely African-American institution. And so big transition to go from an institution that is entirely African-American to the institutions we have in Ohio, which are not entirely African-American. And it's a great transition story that, again, leads to a good conversation around what banks can do to help really support and promote their diversity efforts. So Jasmine, I'm hoping we have solved your audio issues. Can you say hello to everybody for me so I can make sure the sound's coming through?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. High five. Great job, Paige. You guys all rock. Jasmine, I'm going to turn the floor over to you for you to go ahead and just tell us about yourself.
Sweet. Thank you, Stephanie, for the great introduction. I'm so excited to be a part of this kickoff call for this wonderful series. So, a little bit about Jasmine. I am a proud African-American woman that is a part of the LGBT community, so I fit into a lot of minority categories. I am the youngest of 3 girls with 2 beautiful parents that have been married for over 30 years. Let's see, where did my journey begin? I had the pleasure of attending 2 historically Black colleges and university, one here in Ohio, Central State University, where I received my bachelor's in science and early childhood education. And I went to Savannah State University to receive my master's in business administration in 2016. My ultimate goal was to actually teach overseas. Banking was not in my future. I did not see that coming. I actually have my certificate to teach English as a second language as well. So this is how the story begins. Hood ceremony, December 2016, the president of the only Black-owned bank in Savannah, Georgia, Mr. Robert James, at our ceremony said, whoever does not have a job, come see me. So I'm like, I don't have a job. So I'm gonna go see him after the hood ceremony. Could not find this guy to save my life. Finally, that Monday, I sent him an email. He told me to come in for an interview. The interview wasn't really an interview. It was different from my previous interviews. So he's I'm proud member of a Black fraternity, Omega Psi Phi, and I'm a proud member of the first public service sorority, Delta Sigma Theta. So we had that connection. So we talked about that. We talked about traveling overseas because his daughter was overseas. He told me if I could impress Miss Williams, who was the BSA officer, that I had the job. Talked to her the next 2 days, got hired that following Monday, started in the banking world. January 2017, I started as a assistant BSA officer, and then I went to learn how to be a teller, customer service, went to operations, proofing. I stayed there for about 2 years, and I came back home to my hometown, Cincinnati. And a good friend that I known since 6th grade, she told me that Northside Bank was hiring. So I was like, okay, I'll come in, start as a teller. The environment was nice. It was a really family-oriented place. A few months later, they said that they had a opening in operations. So went from there, and now I am in electronics as well. So that's ATM, wires, customer service, ACH, anything they ask me to do, I'm basically here to do. So yeah, that's a little background about Jasmine.
Thank you, Jasmine. I appreciate you sharing that. So a couple things about your story that I want to ask you to just expand on a little bit. So tell me when Robert James came and said to you, to your group, if you don't have a job, come talk to me. Talk to me about that. So how did that, because to your point, you never had thought about banking. And so do you think you ever would have considered banking if he didn't do that? And how did him coming and say that, make you feel about looking at the banking industry, this industry you'd never thought of before?
To be honest, if he wouldn't have mentioned it, I probably would have been somewhere overseas right now. But the fact of the matter was I was not working as a teacher anymore, and my graduate assistantship was coming to an end because I was graduating. So I needed a job, I need to pay bills, and I love money and finance. So I was like, cool, I can do this for a year or two until I can make it overseas. But I got into the field and I love it. Like, I love learning the different aspects of the banks. The only thing I have not touched just yet is loans, and I think the trust department. I have my hands in pretty much everything else.
Okay. And then one last question regarding Robert, and that is, Did he come to, can you say again, I may have missed it. Did you say he came to your, was it your graduation ceremony that he came to?
The hoodie ceremony. The hoodie
Okay,
ceremony.
okay.
Right
Okay,
before,
right.
the day before graduation, and he was a guest speaker for that ceremony.
Okay. All right, that's fabulous. So that would be one of the tips that, you know, I definitely would support as well and encourage people to be thinking about is, and we'll talk about it more in some of the future sessions that we're going to have, but it's getting out there and it's tapping on those individuals, whether it's at you know, near the graduation of high school or whether it's near the graduation of college. It's introducing banking as an idea, and it's saying, hey, you know, if you don't know what you want to do yet, or if you don't have an opportunity, just come talk to me. And even if they never get into banking, it's an introduction into an industry that honestly they may have never thought about.
Because I did not at all.
Right, that is correct. And so obviously, it, you know, based upon the fact you're African American and the bank was an African American bank, did you, you know, would assume that we didn't have that lack of a diversity feel that it might be in an institution that is predominantly non-diverse. But was there anything that they still did that made you feel even more included? I mean, other than the fact that they predominantly all look the same?
It was the family feeling. So I was the youngest person there at the bank. So when I walked in, lady named Miss Maddie and Christina automatically took me underneath their wings, called me their daughter. They looked out for me. They had me go on runs every day for them because they didn't know once across the street. So I would go get their like snacks and things of that nature. But it was like a warming feeling. Since I was in Savannah, not Cincinnati, around my family, it was like a family away from home.
Okay, all right, good. And then when you think about the dynamics of working in a place where everybody looks a little bit more the way you do versus in a place where they don't, what's something that you miss? What's something that, you know, is that you really appreciated about that environment that is a little bit of a bigger miss in this environment?
Ooh, that's a great question. Give me a second. I would say not having to code switch or having to put on a mask when you come in to work. So say, for instance, if something is happening in the community that day that affects the Black community, when you walk into that bank, they already know what's going on. So they won't ask you, oh, how was your weekend? Because our weekend was probably the same because we may have suffered from like secondhand trauma, but coming into the bank I'm currently at, you don't have that connection. So how your weekend was probably will be totally different from my weekend. But then you have to act like everything is fine when sometimes it's really not.
So that's a great, I think that's a great point that you bring up too, you know, so making sure I understand what you're saying there. If you walk into a bank where it's not as ethnically diverse, and we come from something that like the protest that we recently had at the bank in Atlanta, it sounds like it was a given. Everybody probably had a pretty bad weekend, and the question was really more of, you know, how are you holding up from, you know, how are you holding up? You know, how'd you get through the weekend, in contrast to in an environment where that wouldn't necessarily have the same level of impact. There is that, you know, how was your weekend? I had this awesome weekend. You know, I went to the pool or whatever it was that someone did. So is that kind of what you're referencing there?
Yes, exactly.
And then so when people find themselves in that scenario, because I could also appreciate if we have bankers who go, well, I don't want to approach every single person as though they're always upset, you know, about anything that happens. So what would you say is a way that somebody could ask that question in that moment that would make you feel a little bit less like you had to have a mask on? Is it just knowing? Is it just being more aware of the issues, or is it how they ask the question overall?
I think it would be how you ask the question, because, you know, you walk in every day, hey, how are you doing? But actually being genuine behind the meaning of asking the question. So like, no, really, how are you doing today? I know today might be a rough day for you. Is there anything I can do to help?
Yep. I like that it might be like, this might have been a tough weekend for you. And that way, if it wasn't, you go, no, you know, that's them. But if it was, then you're right. That's a really good way that you can put that out there, and that it feels a little bit more genuine. So great example. I appreciate that. Are there any other examples that, you know, that you'd want to throw out of, you know, just things that cause a different field that takes a little bit more intentionality to get that same feeling of inclusion that you had at the other institution?
I would say for instance, just looking at, so all the senior leadership at the bank in Savannah and board members all look like me. So you
Okay.
had that feeling like, okay, hey, they made it here, I can make it here too.
Okay.
Being at different organizations, you don't see too many people that look like you up in leadership roles. So I'm a person that is very goal driven. I want to make it to the top, so I will make it to the top. So I'm able to push through the barriers, but everyone is not like that. So if you don't see someone that looks like you, how can you have this goal that you want to achieve if you don't know that goal is actually achievable?
Okay. And that is, that's, I think, where a lot of our bankers are coming from and why they're on this call right now, is that idea of they recognize that need to get more diversity in their leadership line. They recognize the need to get diversity on their board. And that is something that, again, we'll be talking about in further sessions as well. But I think that it's good to understand it's not just about that community impact, to be able to look from the outside and go, that bank is, that bank truly is diverse because they have somebody, of color on their board, or a female on their board, if it's a board that's all male at this time. But it's an impact to the employees, and your employees not seeing people in those leadership positions does cause them to feel like, then do I really have an opportunity here, or am I going to be limited? And that can be the case whether you're ethnically diverse, whether you're a woman. It could be any of those categories from a diverse perspective that could cause you to feel, I'm not represented at the top, so why should I ever think I'm going to be able to get there?
Right. It's like breaking through that glass ceiling.
Yeah. And so that's a great term to use. So I would ask this question, and actually I want to talk about a comment that someone made that I thought is brilliant, about what you had mentioned. They said that they understand what you're saying, about coming in because something happened over the weekend. There's no psychological safe space to have that conversation in a predominantly non-diverse workplace. Brilliant way of wording that. Thank you for sharing. Yes. I think that's the other piece. And whether there is not one, which I'm not, the person that submitted the question, I'm not disagreeing with you that there's not. But it could be an environment where there is a psychological safe place. But when it comes to leaders making that commitment to diversity, it's how are you conveying that there's a safe place? So it's one of the things that I remember you saying to me, Jasmine, early on, is you talked about the idea that sometimes saying nothing is saying something, even if you feel like it's not. And so if you haven't specifically talked about the fact that it's safe to talk about those things, you haven't demonstrated it, then it doesn't matter that there wouldn't be that negative ramification. The fear is still there, and if you haven't addressed it, it's just like allowing it to be there. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. And
go ahead. No, you go.
No, like I truly believe, I know a lot of leaders in different organizations, different banks feel if we just don't say anything that we're playing it safe. But when you look at the community that you serve and the employees that you have, not saying anything is actually saying something. Like it's kind of dismissive of the whole situation, in my opinion.
Yeah. And why do you think, when it comes to that playing it safe, what do you think that they're trying to play it safe from? Like what is the obstacle that they need to try to overcome to feel more comfortable with making that statement?
I would say it's either fear of saying the wrong thing or putting out the wrong message. Okay. And not having people in place or at the table to help you create the right dialogue that you want to put out there to the community.
And I just want to say that I think we talked about that. I think you have an example where someone in the community reached out to you. Can you share that with me a little bit, if you don't, or share it with the group if you don't mind?
So I sit on a nonprofit here in Cincinnati. Been there for going on 2 years. It's been a while. And recently, with all the riots going on in Cincinnati, well, actually across the world, the ED had reached out to me and asked me, hey, I want to put out a statement on social media and put a sign out front. What do you think about this dialogue? So we discussed the dialogue, made some changes, but she wanted to put what did she want to put? She wanted to put something out front that says Black lives are valued instead of saying Black lives matter. And I had told her, if you shy away from the statement Black lives matter, you're basically dismissing the whole movement. So it's not saying that if we say Black lives are valued, or get a little worked up. It's not saying that if we're saying Black lives matter, that we're dismissing all lives. It's just saying that at this point, until Black lives matter, then all lives can't matter. So putting a statement out there that is not exactly what the movement is about is kind of dismissing the whole meaning behind what is going on and what we're trying to stand for the people that we serve.
So that's, that is a helpful perspective, because I would be somebody who probably would go, that's a great statement. Like, we're saying we value them, and that's a great statement, and not have thought about, what that, the power of, for you, of what that statement, that specific slogan, and slogan's the wrong word, so I apologize, what that specific wording is. And so that is another great example, and another key takeaway for our leaders is not to shy away from making the statement, but do make sure that you talk to somebody that can help draft it, that can help talk about the importance of it. I am, I'm half white and half Native American. And I'm somebody who, quite honestly, when I first heard it, I'm like, well, why don't all lives matter? Like, so Native American lives don't matter? And it took the same thing. It took me having that conversation with a friend who goes, well, Stephanie, let me help you look at it from this perspective. And that was, that was important. That was really helpful for me. And so I think I want leaders to understand there isn't that expectation that I think on average, there's not that expectation that we expect leaders to understand every component. We expect you to understand all the dynamics behind being African American, understand all the dynamics behind being Native American, understand everything behind LGBT. We're not expecting that. But what shows a commitment to diversity is when you take the time to ask and understand. And that is different than just saying, well, we don't want to upset anybody, so we won't say anything, versus we want to show you support, and we want to make sure that we're showing it in a way that matters to you.
And that's why it's important to have a diverse leadership and have diverse people at the table when making decisions. So everybody that is a part, whether it's race, age, sexuality, you can have different perspectives, and then collectively we can come up with one solution that fits everyone.
Right. And in between, so, there is the perfect world, the world that we want to get to, and then there's the world that some of our financial institutions find themselves in right now, where they don't have that leadership. And in some cases, it's not for lack of trying. So I can also say that in my 15 years of HR, there have been times where we completely focused on we absolutely have to get a diverse candidate in this role. And every trick we tried, every hoop we jumped through still didn't work to do it. And so it's not sometimes that you're not doing great effort. It's not like Field of Dreams. And you guys will hear me probably say this every week. It's not if you build it, they will come. If you build it and you do the right thing, that's what's important, and that will help get some, but sometimes you're going to do everything right and still not get somebody. So let's talk about, if I'm a financial institution, I don't have any senior leaders that are diverse, I don't have any board members that are diverse, and maybe I've worked to do that and it hasn't worked, or maybe I haven't. How could they get some of those thoughts at the table when they're making those decisions until they bridge the gap between where they are and where they want to be?
I would say start at your entry level. So you have so many different employees in your institution of different backgrounds, and getting their opinions, although they're not senior leadership, But to be honest, they're the first face that the customer sees. They're the ones that made the transaction. They're the one that closed the deal. So start grooming those that you have in place right now to build up your company, because they've been there and obviously they're still there, so they're dedicated. So I would start there.
Okay. And I would also share a couple other options are, community leadership, reaching out to leadership in the community that is who you're trying to draft a message that from an impact perspective, who's being impacted by that message is another way that if you don't have anyone on staff or you don't want to go to that entry level line, that's another group you can turn to. And a part of the reason we're doing these dialogues is to help you realize there are places across the state, there are banks across the state that have diverse individuals. And so you maybe don't want to reach out, somebody wouldn't want to reach out from Cleveland directly to Jasmine, but maybe you reach out from Cleveland to Jack and you say, Jack, I know you have Jasmine, I know she's a great banker. What insights did you gain from her? And even that is more than doing nothing. Even that, it gets you more insight than having no exposure at all.
I agree. I'm all for networking and collaborating.
Amen to, I agree to that as well. So I want to transition and because we are already almost 40 minutes into this call. Look how quickly time flies. And I want to transition and talk just a little bit about this idea when it comes to social media, when it comes to websites, and so maybe share an example. Is there, and it doesn't have to even be a banking example. And I've got one that I'll share as well. But I want to start with you of a company that you can think of that says they have a commitment to diversity, but we go to don't say the company name. But when you go to the website, what do you see or what don't you see?
Give me 2 seconds. Let me think. So I have a company in mind, won't give out any names.
Thank you.
One of their, I'm all for when I look at companies, I look at their mission statements, their core values, things of that nature. So one of the core values for this company is diversity.
I'm sorry, diversity?
Yes.
Okay.
It's diversity. So when you go on their website, meet the team. But the team, out of maybe 15 people, it might be one Black person or one person of color or a minority person. The board, probably roughly 10 people, and it's all Caucasian, but there's only one woman. I'm like, okay, that's diverse. Cool.
Yeah.
So things like the values and what you're saying doesn't actually match.
Yeah.
See. So.
Yep. And so I think that's a great point, because probably going to the very first thing you said is you say one of your core values is diversity, but yet nothing I'm seeing on your site really reflects that. And so it's, and again, there's that gap. I'm sure they want diversity to be one of their core values, but to be able to say they're there may be a little bit of a stretch. They're doing nothing to communicate that. And so do we reestablish? Is it really a core value, or is it a strategic goal? And just be thinking about that, because that's exactly, what I would say too, is it is funny when you go on a site and there are a lot of companies that will be in their mission or that will be their core value, and then everyone looks, similar to each other. Mm-hmm. And then I've also seen companies though that have some amazing diversity. So as we talked about, what you see when you're looking at the website is all the nature pieces. I'm looking at a website and I'm seeing, is there somebody that is non-white? Is there someone that's a female? But then there are all those other dynamics. And so one of the things I've seen companies do is spotlight and highlight an employee. And that's where you can tell that story where that person is diverse. Not diverse. That person is, let's say, a veteran. You can tell that story of, that person, really put themselves through college by themselves, came from a low socioeconomic environment, put themselves through college, and then has just, risen to this particular level, then you can start to tell stories about those other layers and dimensions of diversity that do help people see what you're supporting. And that's a big part of it. It is really not just about the nature part. Sadly, the nature part is what you see, which on social media and websites is the main aspect. But then luckily you have the ability to put in additional information. Another one I would say that I saw a company do is they had a handful of employees. It was, again, predominantly non-diverse, but they had a handful of employees who were married to someone who was diverse. And so when they were going to, spotlight that employee, they would get a picture of that employee's family. So now you've added that diversity. You've added that level of diversity that is there. It matters. Like, that is an important level of diversity. And, as we'll talk about in a different episode, a kid is like a piece of your heart walking around. And so when there's issues that are impacting your children, you feel them, even if you don't look the same way as your children. And so that's another way that you can, help to enhance that as you're talking about your staff and what your commitment is.
One thing I do love about Northside Bank is we have an internal newsletter that goes out, and every month it's an employee that is spotlighted. So you get pictures, and then our marketing person asks you different questions, and you are able to pick the next person that go online, so you can get to know everyone. I think that would be like a great idea for the website as well.
Yep. And, just remember, for anybody who's in marketing and starting to feel anxiety and having a heart attack here, you need to make sure you follow all of your proper procedures. You can't just put them on the site without talking to them. You've got to get releases for the pictures. So that's not what this program is about, to talk about all of those legal components. But for anybody who's panicking, I want to make that disclaimer that you do want to do that.
We're sorry.
Right, that's correct. The other thing, another example I would share with you is that is one to this day, it makes me laugh, and I won't say either who the company is, but a company that's known for its diversity. I mean, has won awards and is known for its diversity. And I was talking with somebody who was from the talent acquisition department once, and they said, Stephanie, you have got to see this. And so they pulled up the, and I don't do social media very well, so I don't know whether it was Twitter or Snapchat, or I don't know which is which. They pulled up something I've never seen before. And they go, look at this. And they're scrolling through, and you see all the leadership, and then you see, certain celebrities that are known with that company. And I know where she was going by the time, like, we're scrolling to the third page, and then we hit the fourth page, and on the fourth page, there's a non-celebrity, member of management. This is a regular employee kind of person that was finally there, but as a mother. So we had to go another page down, and then there's one, and that one was like as a partner, like as a spouse.
Mm-hmm.
One more page before you saw a female in a role that was professional. And it was shocking. It was shocking in that moment, just to think, what a miss. Like, how do you miss this? How is it 6 pages before I see one image of a woman who is a professional, and yet you want me to go tell people that we super support causes that are, for women? And I'll be honest, the company does. They're fabulous. That is not representative. And part of what happens with that company, I know, is that the majority of people in the leadership roles don't use Twitter and Snapchat and Instagram. Their messages aren't being conveyed because they don't understand the impact of those programs.
Right.
So I would share for our bankers on the line, if you are going to have social media, make sure that part of your social media plan, if diversity, equity, and inclusion is important, make sure that part of that is regularly reviewing your site to see, are we making sure, where do we have people placed? And I don't know anything about how things get placed on your social media, but I can tell you then if it means you have to do something more frequent, then you've got to do more frequent pictures. But this is where that next generation of talent looks. They are looking at that type of, before they look at your annual report to see what your financials were, they're out on your social media pages and they're out on your website. So featuring your employees, I think, is a good call out. Really making sure that you're monitoring it and noticing when you start to get too heavy into not having anything from a diverse perspective featured would be another one. Anything additional you'd share, Jasmine?
I think we hit the nail on the head on that one.
Okay.
Great point.
So I'd like to take a minute and ask, and one more, this will be our last poll question for the day. And this is going to require you guys to multitask, which I understand many of you probably, if you're like me, have been doing that anyways. And I just want you to remember, this is confidential. Nobody knows who put what in there. Take a minute and look at your bank's social media site. Go over, take a look, or your website. And then the question is really just about getting an idea of where are our banks? Where are Ohio's financial institutions? Is there plenty of D&I demonstrated throughout the entire pages? Is D&I reflected in an equivalent amount to what the bank's strategy is? Is there enough D&I to not alienate someone so they wouldn't come in and say, I'm not going to do this, I don't want this at all, but it could be more? Is there only one or two examples, or is there none at all? So I'm going to leave that going for a couple of minutes while I tell people that this is also a time for you to let us know what questions you have. So Jasmine and I would love to be able to answer any questions. Does anybody have a question that they want to ask, or is there something that anybody wants to share that you haven't had a chance to share yet? We'd welcome being able to respond to any of those. We're at about 44%, which is pretty fast. So some of you guys must already have known what your website looked like. Anything, Jasmine, anything last comments you want to say before we'll finish this poll here in a couple minutes, and then I'm going to give a summary of where we are and kind of close this program out. Anything you wish you had said that you hadn't said yet, or anything that you think is really important for our leaders or other listeners to take away when they're thinking about their DE&I strategies?
I would say a key takeaway is to remember your audience. And when you do that, remember to have those people at the table with you before you make decisions. It's okay to ask your employees for their opinions, because it will help your institution grow in the long run. Let me think. I don't know, and just try your best to make the bank a safe place for everyone. Doesn't matter their age, their backgrounds, their sexuality, because we're at work more times than we're at home. So having that safe place that we can come and still make the bank thrive, but still making sure we're okay as well. Because when you have employees that are feeling good and happy, your business thrives as well.
And just if we can give them just a couple examples, what's something that they can do to make that bank safe? What's something that someone's done that's helped you to feel safe?
Great question. I don't know. I'm more taken to people that are genuine.
Mm-hmm.
So people that really ask, like, hey, how are you doing? Like, how was your day? But really mean it.
Mm-hmm.
And a smile.
Yep.
Like, you don't say anything at all, but just a smile where you walk past can help somebody's day, period.
Yeah. And you had said earlier about when you ask a question, kind of understanding the impact and asking genuine questions and showing genuine interest. And that was a great call out as well. And just inviting the conversation. Yes. It is scary, guys. I do know that. And having, again, the background that I have, I can in HR, I can tell you I've sat through depositions where we thought we were making the right call and someone still got offended. Sadly, people will be offended. That's going to potentially happen. There's no way to do something that will completely avoid it. But I would say that if you at least try to have the question, that is going to be sending a message that we're trying and that it's a safe place. The other thing I'd say is be very mindful of how people react. And you do open up a question, someone does react negatively. the way to respond isn't to go, oh my gosh, you know, I'm trying here and I can't believe that, you know, that you're going to act this way. And I know people are probably on the line going, who would ever do that? I've seen it. I've definitely seen it. And even if you don't say it to the person who reacted that way, if you say it to the other people in the room when that person walks out, or if you say it to your leadership team when it's just your leadership team, that's still conveying a different message than the commitment that you're trying to have. So that commitment to diversity is, you know, let's have that conversation. Let's talk about it. You know, I'm sorry that I upset you. That by no means, you know, was my intent. Tell me how I could have done that conversation differently so that it would have been, you know, better, versus just going, forget it. It's just not worth it.
Yeah, open dialogue is always key.
Yep,
Being
it
able
is.
to share, allowing the person to share and for you to actually listen before you get your response.
Yep, correct. Listen to understand, right? Not to react.
Correct.
And someone else shared, not only do you need to have the conversation, but you need leadership buy-in and follow through if you're going to say you're committing to DE&I, and that is absolutely true.
That is.
Oh, sorry for you guys who can't see the speakers. Let me drop the poll down. I apologize for that. So I want to, now everybody's back up. Thank you very much for the person who shared that with us. I want to talk about that really quick too, and give a shout out to Mike Adelman. You know, it would have been very easy. Mike had another meeting to be in, and it would have been very easy for Mike to let me just run with this and kick it off and go with it. And the commitment from Mike was, no, you know, we're committed to this, and this is an important place for me to be today, is on this call to kick it off, to let people know, and then I can go to the meeting that I have later. And I just want to point that out, like that's the kind of stuff we need to do. What sometimes does happen is that you identify somebody, and a lot of times it is the person who looks more the part. You identify someone who's going to do the work, and then they do the work, and they send it, and they're like, here's what we should do. And then somebody else just forwards it out and says, okay, this is what Stephanie said we need to do. Versus, you know, in our world, Mike would get that message, and then Mike would draft a communication. He might still forward my note, but it would start with a communication that came from him. And that's what I'd encourage, you know, leaders to also think about as a way to truly commit and show that follow through that somebody just mentioned. You don't just say it's important and you let someone else do it. You say it's important, and then anything around it, you're leading the effort on. You have a piece of it. What do you think, Jasmine? Anytime, have you ever had that experience where you're like, here, you do it, and then it's all you?
A lot of times in my life.
Yeah.
But you just move and groove, because I want to see, everyone wants to see. So if I have to be the person that endures it all for everybody else to achieve their goals, then I would be that person. Got
it. So I'm going to just quickly share with you guys the survey results before we summarize and end the call. 50% of the people, and 74%, so just give you an idea from a number, we've got 30 attendees on the call, 74% voted, and 50% of those that voted indicated that they only have one or two examples of diversity, equity, and inclusion on their website. 10% indicated they have no diversity, equity, or inclusion on their website. And so what I would say is, especially for that 10% and for probably most of the 50, if your commitment, if you say you have a commitment to diversity, that's something you guys probably want to look at how you enhance that. It is, especially now, websites and social media are the place that future customers look. It's the place that investors look. It's the place that future employees look. And so, you know, start looking at ways to make that website reflective. You know, find ways to spotlight other employees. Find ways to spotlight, you know, customers who are diverse, and then think about diversity in all of its part, and find ways to spotlight those things that aren't obvious by nature, and make sure that it's not just on one page. So it's not just the main page of the website, you know, but it's on other pages as well. But I mean, I will say that this means so 40% of you have either enough to not alienate or more, and 15% of you have plenty, which is just fabulous. So commend you guys that are doing that work, and you know, 10% have an amount equivalent to what they're trying to do. So it's 25%. You know, I'll take that. I will take that right now. Jasmine, I want to start this conclusion by thanking you. You kicked off something. These didn't exist before. Very easy for somebody to, say, I don't want to be the first one. You not only were willing to be the first one, but you also were paramount in my coming up with what that should look like and how we would roll these out. And so thank you from the bottom of my heart. And thank you for believing in this cause enough to do this. In addition, thanks for what you do for the industry. Appreciate that as well. Our key takeaways, sorry, I went one slide too. Oh, no, I didn't. Our key takeaways, when we talked about ways to authentically commit to DE&I, and what we'll be doing is before our next session, we will post each of these key takeaways so that you don't have to write them all down now or try to remember them, but you can go out to our website and you'll be able to see the key takeaways from each session. But in this case, the couple that I would really call out would be that early reach out, getting to people. And I actually am a big proponent of at the high school level. A lot of times by the time students get into college, they have their mindset on where they want to go. And then switching to a different industry like banking almost seems like the thing they got stuck with versus going into it into college thinking this is something I could really do for the rest of my life. So that early reach out, and leaders, you can do that at graduation ceremonies, you can do it at career days, job fairs, lots of opportunities to do that. But even just making that reach out of, hey, if you don't have something, come and talk to me, that opportunity to talk will drive interest into the banking industry. And ensuring that you have somebody at the table, having that diversity at the table, whether it's from your leadership team, from your bank, from your community, talking to another institution, have somebody there that can help you draft those messages that you're going to make, and then make the messages and follow through on them. So those would be some of the key takeaways that came out of our conversation today from authentically committing. And then things to do virtually, like we talked about, dig deeper into the organization. If you don't have that diversity at your leadership level, look at opportunities to spotlight employees, look at opportunity to spotlight through words, the things that may not be evident through pictures, looking at ways to spotlight activities with customers, and look at ways to spotlight partnerships that you have with different community groups. So those would be various things you could do to be able to increase the image of diversity, and then making sure that that's spread out across your entire site. Or at a minimum, if you just don't feel that makes sense for you, take a look and see if you've listed diversity as a priority while not demonstrating that same commitment throughout the website. Next steps, I would encourage for those of you who are saying, okay, we had this call, what can we do next? Well, continue to participate. I encourage you, we don't have to listen to all of them. Anybody who's registered will have the ability to hear something on demand after the fact, but I ask for people to just continue to participate in these dialogues. I also ask you guys to recommend for others to participate. Peers, that was a big one, is, for those of you who are CEOs on the call, I am so appreciative of you being on the call, or senior leadership who was tapped by a CEO to be on the call. And talk to your peers if you found value in this, and let them know the value that they could find by having someone in their bank listen in as well. I'd love to see a strong group of bank leadership across the industry listening into what these bankers have to share. Try some of the tips that we provided. Love to hear your feedback on whether those worked or not. And then from other DEI programs, we have an HR forum on August 4th. If you're not an HR forum member, you can still come in and enroll just for that one session. And we are going to be talking about DE&I tactics, that entire program, from leveraging it to growing it to building inclusive environments. So that's an opportunity. ABA also has a fabulous DE&I website that they just rolled out a week or two ago that I'd encourage you to go to. Next week, we have Chalana Williams, Vice President Community Development from First Fed Lakewood. She will be joining us. The topic and takeaways will be creating interest in banking careers at the high school and college level, which we touched on today, but also dispelling concerns of tokenism when, oh, you got a shout out for being awesome, Jasmine. Dispelling concerns of tokenism when you are trying to enhance diversity, because it can feel awkward when suddenly you look around a table and you realize you're the only one there. And a lot of times everybody at the table is looking at you going, I know why she's here. So encourage you guys to, to listen in on that one, to understand how you can prevent that from being the environment that we have. I just want to finally end with a big thank you. I hope that you come back, and I hope that at a minimum you find a way to build from the foundation of our similarities as we talk about these things, as well as embrace and value our differences. It will make a big difference for how successful your diversity efforts could be. Thank you again, Jasmine. You are wonderful. It's been a fabulous session, and I appreciate everybody's involvement.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Jasmine. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Bye.